Thank you all for joining us today. This is, of course, the CSP Partner Training, and this is Nina Bhattacharya. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships for NRCS, based in Gainesville, Florida. And for today's agenda, we're going to go ahead and have Deanna with our program staff provide a brief overview of CSP program. And then Nathan Ficker, our State Resource Conservationist, will be able to kind of dig down a little bit more into the planning and enhancements. We initially were going to have Juan Hernandez, our State Conservationist, here to do the welcome and opening remarks, but he's got tied up in another meeting. So we'll hopefully be able to touch base with him a little bit later. But again, thank you all for joining us, and we don't want to spend too much time on presentations and whatnot. There's a good portion allocated for question and answer, and we're going to be opening it up for people to provide comments and questions later on, and we hope this could be a good discussion. And if there's ever a need for a follow-up information to be provided after this training, we will most definitely send that over to you all as well. This meeting is being recorded, so I'll send out the link to this after today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation on to Deanna with our program staff. If you would like to come on, I can advance the slides, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Nina. Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everything is doing well. So my name is Deanna Avellanet, and I am the Florida State Program Specialist for CSP. So next slide, Nina, please. The reason of this training, and this is kind of like an overview of the topics we're going to be discussing during this presentation. So we are going to go through general information regarding CSP, CSP eligibility, and this will include land eligibility, participant eligibility, and threshold eligibility. For CSP application processing, what is the process in order to apply for the program, the CSP planning. Also, we're going to discuss a little bit about the CSP payment and payment limitation. And then at the end, we'll do a recap of some of the important items about CSP. I also have a question and answer. I know we're going to have a question and answer also at the end of the meeting, but just feel free to ask any question you may have. Next slide, please. So the purpose today for this meeting is to provide an overview of the Conservation Stewardship Program, and knowing as a CSP, and how this program helps producer financially and provide also technical assistance and assist the applicant to meet their goals in the farm in the entire farm operation. Next slide. So this is a general information for program purposes. Next slide, please. The CSP program. So the CSP Natural Resource Conservation Service, this program provides technical and financial assistance to encourage producers to address priority resource concerns and improve and conserve the quality and condition of natural resource compressing manner. This is done by the participant undertaking additional conservation activities and improving, maintaining, and managing existing conservation activity across the entire agricultural operation. So the main purpose of this program is that the participant, the main goal of the participant is to enhance their resource concerns, their conservation under the ground, and then this program help to improve and maintain the existing conservation activities, and at the same time it helps to improve the land in any other ways, and I can discuss this later on in going in more details about the practices and enhancements. Next slide, please. Okay, so the conservation activities. So conservation activities include conservation system, conservation practices enhancement, bundles, management measure, and planning used to address resource concerns. So I know most of you may have a little bit of idea of EQUIP program, and this one is more practices. So when you hear practices, it's more like cover crops, tree planting, something like that. So then when we talk about enhancement are conservation activities used to treat resource concerns and improve conservation performance. The enhancement address the additional consideration of the criteria that exceed the minimum requirement of the base practice. This base practice is just what I told before. The base practice is more forest management and something like that. Then you have the enhancement, and the enhancement is just to enhance that base practice. We also have bundles under this program, and the bundles consist of at least 3 enhancements that address multiple resource concerns at the same time. Each bundle has a unique bundle code. The participant may elect to include enhancement of practices under the contract, or they may elect just to do enhancement or just bundles or just a practice. Next slide, please. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about the CSP eligibility. Next slide. So in order for the participant to apply under CSP, there's some required forms that they will need to fill out. We also work hand by hand with FSA, that is the Farm Service Agency. So the main thing for the participant in order for apply for any programs with NRC and including the CSP, they will need to establish farm records with the Farm Service Agency. They will need to go to the office, and then they will need to tell them that they would like to establish records in order to apply under NRCS program. Most likely, FSA are gonna require them to fill out the AD 1026. This is the Highly Erodible Land Conservation and Wetland Conservation Certification. Also the 941, and this is the AGI form. This is the Adjusted Ground Income Certification, just to ensure that the participant income is less than $900,000. They also need to fill out the farm operating plan. This is more to know who have signature authority and who are the members of that farm plan operation. Other eligibility documents may be required, and these may be like FSA may require a lease agreement just to ensure that the participant indeed contract the land that is under the farm records. So they may require any other legal documentation, and like I said, it's just to ensure that indeed the participant has control of the land or indeed have lease agreement for the land that is going to be under their records. Next slide, please. So in addition to being the operator, owner, or other tenant, and this is something that they have to be, when they establish their record with FSA, they need to be listed as owner, operator, or other tenant of the land. The applicant will also share the risk of producing the crop and participate in the daily management, administration, and performance of the operation for the land included in the contract. So in order for them to be eligible for the program, they need to be the operator, owner, or other tenant of that land and also share the risk of producing the crop. So they also need to be the operator of the land. Next slide, please. Land eligible for CSP include public and private land that is part of the participant operation. When it's public land, participant may only apply if they are the operator of the land and have control of the land for the term of the contract. Participant must enroll on the land unless it is part of a substantially different operation, or they do not have control of the land for the term of the contract. So when they are signing up for CSP, they need to enroll all their eligible land. And they need to ensure they have control of the land for at least 5 years on the contract. That is the term of the contract. If they do not have control of the land for 5 years, they may leave that land out of the CSP contract. Some of the ineligible land include any land enrolled under the Wetland Reserve Program, any land enrolled on the Conservation Reserve Program, enrolled land or land used for crop production that was not cropped for the 4 of the past 6 years, starting in December 2018. So the same thing, if they have any land that they don't have control of the land for 5 years, that land may be ineligible to be enrolled under the CSP. Next slide, please. So this is more for the stewardship program. In order for them to be eligible for the program, they also need to meet this threshold. The applicant must meet 2 resource concerns at the time of the contract in all the land use that are included in the contract. And they also need to meet at least 1 additional resource concern by the end of the contract on at least 1 land use. So we have probably over 9 resource concerns. So we have to go through a process and assess all these resource concerns. And then at the end, after we assess all the land uses, all the land units, we will get a report, and this is the NRCS that will get that report, and they will need to ensure that the participant, at the minimum, needs 2 resource concerns at the time of the contract, at the time of the application, and then at the end of the contract, they need to meet or exceed another resource concern in any of the land use. So they need, in order to meet or exceed that extra resource concern, they need to at least do a practice or enhancement, and that way will help them to at least have that extra resource concern met at the end of the contract. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the CSP application process. So next slide, Nina, please. So the CSP application processes. So agricultural operation competes separately from this application. So if an applicant has pasture ranch cropland, that they will need to do separate application if they have pasture ranch and cropland forestry. So that means that they will need 1 application under forestry and 1 application under pasture ranch and cropland. So pasture ranch and cropland will be in only 1 application, and then if they have forestry and they also want to apply under forestry, they need a separate application for forestry. Applicant must provide a map that identifies and delineates the boundary of all eligible land uses. So we require that when the applicant is going to provide the application to NRCS, they also provide maps indicating what are the eligible lands. For all the tracts that they have, all the lands that they have eligible, they need to provide a map showing what is eligible, what is the land use of the land, is there anything ineligible on the land, if any of those land the participants don't really have the control of the land for the term of the contract, the boundary of the land, so they need to ensure that they provide this to NRCS. NRCS staff can help the participant in order to provide this map. Like we can help them just to discussing what is the land use, what are the land use that we have, what may be the ineligible land. So this is why it's very important for the participant to communicate with the staff in their area. So we can help them with this map. But yes, these maps are important because we provide payment for the eligible land, especially if they do a practice in those land uses. So we want to be sure that we include all the eligible land under the contract. Next slide, please. The CSP, the application evaluation. So the 2018 FARBIN simplified the ranking criteria, and now we will need to, the Natural Conservation Survey environmental benefits will result in conservation treatment on all state identified priority resource concerns. So right now, from all the resource concerns that are out there, we need to select 8 state priority resource concerns, and then we base the application based in those resource concerns. So the degree to which the proposed conservation activity increase natural resource conservation and environmental benefits. And also, we need to take in consideration the criteria necessary to ensure national, state, and local priority resource concerns will effectively address the resource concern that we have as the state priority resource concern. So these are more the criteria that we base on in the application processing. So yes, we need to ensure we have all those state priority resource concerns and we tackle at least those. And at the same thing, we propose the conservation that we receive as a feedback from local work groups or anything like that. Next slide, please. So the ranking criteria. So any applicant may submit an application for participation in CSP. So we have sign up deadline and the participant, we receive application the entire year, but we have sign up dates in order to go ahead and start ranking our application, access all our application, and start funding those applications. So the state conservation in consultation with the state technical committee and the local work groups have developed ranking criteria to prioritize fund application and address priority natural resource concern in Florida. Like I say, Florida will establish batching period and select the highest ranked application for funding based on applicant eligibility and NRCS ranking process. In fiscal year 2021, we are using the Conservation Assessment Ranking Tool for all program ranking. The Conservation Assessment Ranking Tool is designed to assist NRCS conservation planners, and they assess site existing conditions and identify potential resource concern on an area in the land. So this software, we use this software just, we add all the land that the participant is eligible for in that land. We do a field verification, and we assess all those land use depending on what we see there. And at the same time, we ask the participant goals, what he would like to improve, and that will provide us a ranking. Depending on the question that we answer, that will get ranking depending on those questions, and then field verification that we complete and the assessment, and then we're going to start ranking, funding this application from the higher one to the lower one until all the funds are spent. Next slide, please. So this is what I was just detailing before. NRCS will need to do a field verification. So prior to obligation, however, if the field office staff recently visit the operation for another reason, then the field office may use the existing documentation in the case file to substantiate their knowledge of the operation to fulfill the field verification requirement. So before we obligate a contract, the staff need to go out just to ensure the information the participant provide is correct. So we need to go out to all these eligible land, just be sure that indeed if the participant mentioned that the area is cropland, indeed the area is cropland, just to be sure there's no any ineligible land in the area, and then look for resource concerns. This is part of our planning process. We need to go out and look for those resource concerns, and at the same time, we help the participant to improve those resource concerns. Next slide, please. So now we're going to discuss a little bit in detail the CSP planning requirements. Next slide. So like I mentioned before, the contract requirement, the CSP program is a 5-year contract. So this is why it's very important that the participant has control of the land for those 5 years of the contract. The participant must maintain and manage the existing conservation activities across the entire agricultural operation to at least meet the level of conservation. In addition, the conservation activities installed and adopted over the term of the Conservation Stewardship Program. So when the participant enroll this line under CSP, they need to maintain their operation as is, and they will also maintain any new practice or enhancement under the program. Next slide, please. Conservation Stewardship Plan. So the Conservation Stewardship Plan includes a record of participant decisions and identifies the new conservation activities the applicant agrees to implement and achieve through the CSP contract. NRCS staff will develop and maintain the Conservation Stewardship Program plan using applicable business tools and in accordance with the manual. This is after we do this field verification, we discuss the final plan with the participant to ensure the practices or enhancement the participant would like to implement are scheduled, and also ensure that any other details are good to go before we do an obligation of the contract. Next slide, please. So let's discuss a little bit more about CSP payment and payment limitation for CSP. Next slide, please. So CSP annual payments. So the difference between this program and the Environmental Quality Incentive Program is that the participant will receive an annual payment by fiscal year. In order to earn the payments on a land use, the participant must schedule and implement at least one additional activity on each land use included in the contract. Participant will only receive a payment for the land use or where new practices is being implemented. So if the participant chooses not to schedule a practice or enhancement on a land use, the participant will forego the payment for that land use. So the participant will get a payment for any new practice or enhancement in order for them to establish that practice or enhancement, and they will also receive an annual payment in the land use on where the new practice or enhancement are being implemented. Next slide. So the payment limitation, a person or legal entity may not receive directly or indirectly payment that exceeds $200,000 for all CSP contracts obligated during this Farm Bill. And this Farm Bill is from 2019 to 2023. So the payment limitation will be $200,000. So they can have multiple CSP, but we base the payment limitation in that Farm Bill. So this $200,000 is from 2019 through 2023. And because this is a 5-year contract, if they come back later on to renew or sign up for CSP, the 200 will apply. Well, it's not this 200. They will get another 200 in order to spend for that new CSP. So this is just by Farm Bill, just to make that clear. Next slide, please. And then just to do a recap and some key points, only eligible participants can apply for CSP. So if they want to apply for CSP, the first step for them is just to work with FSA in order to establish the farm records, and then ensure that they are eligible, ensure that they have all the paperwork for eligibility and everything is ready to go. This is a 5-year contract. So CSP is for 5 years. The participant will need to maintain all the practices and all the operation for these 5 years of the contract. Participant must enroll all of the eligible land. So we base this in the farm record. So if they have 10 lands, like 10 tracts in the farm data report, they need to include all the eligible land. Unless something is ineligible, then we keep that out of the program. Applications are needed for ag land and forest land. So like I discussed before, the participant will need separate application for forest land and also for the ag land. The threshold, the participants must meet 2 resource concerns at the time of the application and meet or exceed an additional resource concern at the end of the contract in any of the land use. So this is very important in order for them to be eligible for the program. And also the participant will receive an annual payment for existing management for all the land uses on where new practice or enhancement is being scheduled. So they will get this annual payment just for maintaining the land assets and just by doing these new practices and enhancement in that land use. There is no minimal acres to be eligible to enroll in CSP. So if you have a participant that only have 4 acres and they want to sign up for CSP, they're more than welcome to sign up for CSP. We don't have a minimal acres to be eligible. So I think this is my last slide, Nina. I don't know if anyone have any question now, any general question?
Thanks, Deanna. It looks like we do have one question from Tony Grossman. How much time does NRCS estimate it will take to prepare the necessary paperwork to enroll in the CSP program?
Okay, so we have, like I mentioned, we have separate deadlines. So we have a deadline for application. So we set up deadlines, we send bulletins to the staff, and we have those deadlines for application, for eligibility, for pre-approvals, and for the assessment. So more likely, like right now, we had an application deadline of March 26th, and then we have an obligation deadline of July. So yes, it may be 5 months, 6 months, depends in if we have any issues with the software, and we also need to wait for national headquarters guidance. But it may take that like around 4 to 5 months to have, yes, to come from the application to do an assessment and then to obligate those applications.
And Deanna, I think I'll clarify. Tony, I think, is asking in terms of the landowner filling out the paperwork. How long does that typically take? And Tony, if you would like to jump in too, feel free.
Okay. So yes, that it may be just a day. You can just call FSA, and even sometimes the NRCS staff will also go along with you with FSA. Sometimes we have FSA in the same offices that we are all. So you can call FSA and just ask them what paperwork they will need, but it will take just a day. More likely, unless you forget in paperwork that they need, and then you can submit that later on. But it's a very brief meeting with them, just to be sure you provide them the records that they need, and then you're good to go.
Tony, you're referring to like the operational map and the other stuff that a participant would have to do as well?
Tony, would you like me to unmute your line?
There we go. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, all those details that when we're communicating with landowners about enrolling, to give them an idea of what commitment they're going to be up against when they go into an office, how much time and paperwork do they need to bring with them. So any of those details that you're aware of that relate to the time the landowner is going to spend preparing and applying and getting in the door is helpful to us.
Mm-hmm. At least when I was district conservation, every time that a participant was interested in CSP, I always tell them that I needed at least an hour and a half to meet with them there. Because if I can do everything at once and that they are there, that is great because they can do everything there. And I don't need to call them later on to ask them to come in again if I can do everything in the same day. So yes, I think like an hour and a half, and that way we can go through the maps if they need help with the maps, if they need any help with FSA. So just to be sure of that. Most likely I tell them just to contact FSA before, just to ensure they're gonna be eligible that day as well, and that way they can do everything at once. And like I say, at least they have the information from FSA of what they need in order to enroll those lands and establish those farm records.
And Tony, this is Keisha Harvey. The time period from application, doing eligibility to actually going out in the field, it varies on the size of the operation. So I've had some where we've had to do 10 site visits for CSP in different locations. So it varies. Like Deanna is mentioning with the eligibility portion, maybe an hour and a half, but the field portion can vary on the size of the operation. So that's really the main portions where the participant is involved. Most of everything else is on the NRCS staff or a partner such as yourself. So I hope that sort of answered that for you.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
And I would just add the more they know about their operation and their objectives, the easier that whole process goes.
Yeah, and that's why we're here today, to hopefully learn what things they need to know so that we have those boxes checked before they ever walk in the office.
Okay, any other questions? You can enter into the chat box or raise your hand and I can unmute your line.
Not to be a hog, but while you've got me unchecked, can you explain the reasoning behind separate pools for ag lands versus forest lands?
Yes, with CSP, we kind of assess the land depend of their management, and because their management in the forestry, it may be way different from the ag land, we kind of have separate application, and that way we assess them differently through their programs that we have. But yes, that's why we have an application under that you can include all the cropland, pasture, and ranch, and then everything that is under forestry, we have a separate application for that. So that's the main thing. That's the main reason. Any other questions?
Okay, well, we'll have some opportunity for more questions later on. But next up in our agenda, we've got Nathan Ficker, our State Resource Conservationist, and he will be presenting on, oh, I'm sorry, there is actually one question that popped up from Arlo Kane. Do you need to complete an EQIP contract before applying for CSP?
No. No, this program is separate from EQIP. So if the participant actually have an EQIP contract, they can also sign up for CSP. The only thing we kind of like in the planning, we just need to ensure that we are not doing the same practice on the same land, and we are paying for the same practice in the same land in both contracts. But yes, you can have a participant having a CSP contract and an EQIP contract as well. And they can apply if they think they have done a lot of conservation in the ground and they never had an EQIP before, and they can just sign up for CSP, and we just go through the process just to ensure that at least they meet those two resource concerns at the time of the contract, and then we'll be good to go. Yes, because I know there's some participants out there that they lost conservation and they never been in EQIP, but they have done a lot of management in the ground. So we just need to answer those assessments and ensure that they meet that threshold, and then they'll be eligible for CSP. So they don't need to have an EQIP before a CSP. It's not it's not a requirement.
Okay, I do not see any other questions. We'll go ahead and move on to Nathan. He'll be going over CSP planning and enhancements. And Nathan, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation over to you so you can share your screen. So just one moment. Okay, 1 second. Sorry about this. There we go. Just taking me a moment to be able to pass the baton.
Well, me doing that, I also want to add that what I do like about CSP and is that will actually help the participant to meet their goals, and will also have a help like with the payment. Like they will actually receive the annual payment just for maintaining their operation assets, the land units assets. So if they do a new practice and enhancement in that land unit, in that land use, they will get that payment, the annual payment. So that is a big help for them, especially to meet their goals.
Okay, thank you, Deanna. Okay, Nathan, I think I have passed on the presenter to you. So if you want to unmute your line, go ahead and take it over.
Okay, yeah, looks like that is working. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Nathan Fickert, State Resource Conservationist for Florida. You know, with most of our financial assistance programs, you know, our goal is to address resource concerns, and many of us are familiar with the EQIP model and how we do that with EQIP. In theory, CSP is not any different. We do have a minimum amount of resource concerns that we're supposed to be evaluating, as Deanna covered. And then there are some program rules associated with the number of resource concerns met and how many are met at the end of the contract. So it's a little different in that regard, but still the general concept is the same. We're trying to address resource concerns through financial assistance. So, you know, Tony, a little bit to your question and others as well, you know, we're hoping that the fieldwork process is similar to what our planners and partners are going through for EQIP. You know, we're supposed to be starting with, you know, going to the operation, looking at the resource concerns, and then discussing objectives and how to address those resource concerns with the applicant or the landowner. So, you know, trying to fit that same model, trying to get our planners to not look at CSP different in that regard. I think a lot of times people hear CSP and think CSP and they think it's different. And while it is, there's some programmatic differences and whatnot. I think the key to understanding it is to really look at it from the same aspect of we're still just trying to address resource concerns through this contract and through this process. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this. All right, I am going to hopefully figure out how to share my screen here. Okay. You guys can see my screen. All right, what I just wanted to show you guys here is this is the national CSP page. Just any browser search, if you search NRCS CSP, should bring you to here. This is the national page. Probably one of the better places to get the most up-to-date information, especially when it comes to enhancements and bundles. As of now, we don't have these enhancements and bundles on our ePhotog where the public could access them. hope to get there someday, but there is a bit of change to those every year, so it can become a little bit tough to manage to ensure that we're getting the proper updates all the time. So I just recommend that people at least have this bookmarked and on hand. Typically, this is the most up-to-date information. Lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff. If you dug around, you'd hear what Deanna already presented. What I want to kind of focus on today is down here, CSP enhancements and bundles. Deanna kind of already mentioned how they're supposed to be contracted, why we're contracting them, the payments associated when we contract different enhancements and bundles. I'm going to try to take a deeper dive into, what an enhancement and a bundle is and why we would plan certain enhancements in certain areas. So again, I'm going to come down here, click on FY21 enhancements and bundles, and here's going to be our list. So this list is grouped by the, activity on crops and soil erosion as the resource concern. And then crops and water, and then animals, and then plants. So each one of these main resource concern categories has this whole list of enhancements that count programmatically towards addressing that resource concern. So that's kind of how the pieces start going together as we're trying to plan enhancements to address resource concerns. So this is going to give you the whole list. Now, as a national program, every enhancement is pretty much available to every state. That means there are some enhancements out there that just are absolutely not applicable to Florida. So what we've done is come up with this list. And this was on the email that Nina sent out the other day. And, I don't know if that's big enough for you to see. If it gets too big, I got to scroll around a lot. But, the caveat of this list is that basically this is our NRCS Florida Ecological Sciences Division opinion on what we think the best enhancements for Florida are. Okay, that's all this is. If there are other enhancements somebody's looking at, it doesn't necessarily mean they can't be used, but we might need to do a little extra planning and digging to make sure they fit appropriately. So there is an instruction tab here on this sheet. Basically what we've done, green, we consider that the highest priority enhancements and best fit for Florida. Yellow is a moderate fit. Orange is low priority, and there's usually some sort of technical detail that would need to be reviewed with a state specialist, whether that be a biologist, agronomist, grazing specialist, etc. And there are a few that we colored yet red, just because they just don't fit. They just don't fit in Florida. I'll give you an example of one of those as we scroll down. Let's see, here's a good obvious one. So E612F, sugar bush management. So this is maple syrup management up in, the northern climates. Obviously, hopefully it's pretty obvious that that's not going to fit here in Florida. So there are a couple of these kind of no-brainer, not going to work here that we've colored red. And to this point, I've never had anybody ask us if we can use some of these enhancements that we've colored in red. So hasn't been an issue yet. But again, some of the yellow and orange ones would take a little bit of additional planning to make sure they fit. I probably should backtrack. If you look at the codes, an enhancement is just it's based on one of our existing conservation practice standards. So over here, if you're familiar with 612, tree and shrub planting, the code here means this is an enhancement. That's what the E is for. 612, tree and shrub planting, and then B, it's simply the second one. That's it. Real simple. Nothing else to it. 612A, B, C. That's it. So still think practice, still think conservation practice standards if you're trying to do research on these. Like I said before, don't look at this differently. We're still just applying a conservation practice to address a resource concern. So don't let the slightly different practice code fool you. And we're still trying to get to the same goal. So that's what that code means. So yeah, we like people to use this as just kind of like that high cut evaluation of, as I know what resource concerns I need to try to address and what resource concerns need to be addressed for eligibility. This would be a good place to kind of start that search. So let's take a little bit deeper dive then. Let's say that we've got a plant or an animal resource concern on forest land, and we think some sort of prescribed burning, would help us address that resource concern. So, we're going to come here to E338. So again, just simply a prescribed burning enhancement, and we're going to show you guys kind of how to dig deeper into an enhancement. So we're gonna check E338C here. All right, we're gonna go back to this enhancements and bundles page. Once I get there, I'll stop so you guys don't get car sick. All right, here it is. So E338C, sequential patch burning, that is listed under animals. If I click that link, it will bring me to that. I'm going to just jump straight to it because I already have this tab open. All right, so here's your conservation activity sheet. All right, so think of this like what we used to call job sheets or implementation requirements. This is pretty similar to what those are for each of our conservation practices, with a little bit of a tweak for CSP, because as an enhancement, we're supposed to be addressing a higher level of resource concern or a higher level of that conservation practice standard. So sequential patch burning, practice code 338, applicable land use on forest, resource concern it's addressing is animals, enhancement lifespan is 1 year. This is applicable to some programmatic conversation. If the practice has a 1 year lifespan, we can schedule it more than one time on the same acres within that contract. If you see 5 year lifespan right here, you can only schedule that enhancement one time on those acres within the life of the contract. So I'll quick jump over to a 612. All right, 612, these two that we might go over if we have time, 15 years, 15-year lifespan on those tree plantings, okay? So you can only contract that one time on those specific acres within the life of the CSP contract. That's how you would know that. Okay, so I saw a question pop up, and that was going to be one of the next things I cover. So how big do the patches need to be? All right, I'm going to skip down here. A lot of this is somewhat cookie cutter. So I'm going to skip down. Some of this is just a review of what's already in the practice standard, okay? So what we're doing here is we're taking what I would typically think of as a larger block of forest ground. And it doesn't necessarily mean by acres, but I would look at it as the whole of the operation, or at least the contiguous whole part of the operation. So if somebody just, this is their back 80 acres and they have forest and wildlife goals out there, and we're looking to apply this practice on those acres, basically what has to happen is we need at least 3 burns, All right. Selected areas of the enrolled land use acres will be underburned annually for a minimum of 3 consecutive years to create a mosaic of vegetation in different stages of development. So maybe there were times where they would just burn that whole 80 acres in one block, right? And we're on, say, like a 3-year rotation for that, which is fine. That's decent management. We plan that at times. What this enhancement is trying to get someone to do is say, okay, let's take that same block, but now let's chop it up into 3 different pieces. And let's just say we're contracting, we're starting the contract in this year, FY 2021. To make sure we're giving the participant time to line everything up on this. Let's say we want to start burn 1 in year 2022, all right? We're going to plan in 2022, 2023, and 2024 the sequence of these burns, and we're going to split it all up. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we need to burn it on 3 exactly equal portions each year, right? So you don't necessarily have to take 80 divided by 3 and put those acres in that contract year. Let's say we already have an established fire break that we're going to work off of, and that gets us 20 acres in the first year. And then we have another established fire break that's, 40 acres. We're going to do that in the second year. And then final year, we're going to go back to the last 20 to get the full 80 in the contract. Okay, so that's what the patches are. Nina, why don't you unmute Joe? I think he's got a couple other questions. We might as well just chat about it instead of me looking at the chat.
Sure. So would you, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line if you had wanted to ask a question. Or I can read it off too.
Okay, yeah, read it. Yeah, that's fine.
So what if the landowner has 240-acre forest already divided into 80-acre units? Can each unit be considered a patch?
Sure. Yeah, that would be fine. Some of that gets a little bit into contracting, but I would say, yeah, if it's a 240-acre total operation and the producer's objective is to take 80 acres and really improve some aspect of wildlife habitat by, getting into a sequential patch burn, then yeah, I would say you could take 80 of that acres and chop it up into thirds and contract it the way that I just said. Or again, with a 1-year lifespan, you could try to take bigger blocks and get through the whole 240 acres in 5 years if somebody had the ability and the time frame to get that done. So you could do it. You could do it both ways. I think the trickiest part of this enhancement, and honestly with a lot of the CSP enhancements, is getting the plan kind of nailed down from the beginning. As we all know, things change, weather patterns change, goals and objectives change, and it can, just being honest, it can be difficult when you're trying to plan a 5-year contract and hope that everything goes according to that plan. So, all good intentions, we've got existing fire breaks and we chunk this out nice and we've got 20 acres in year 1 and 40 in year 2 and another 40 in year 3. Something happens year 2 and we can't burn, right? Well, that's when you guys, we got to talk to the programs folks, possibly do a modification, see what we can do. So I'll, kind of leave that out, but that's probably the trickiest part. So yeah, Joe, you could do that. That would be okay. That would address the resource concern on those 80 acres and should count for the program. Or you could do the whole block. Is there anything else along with that question?
further on the chat box.
Okay. Now you're only going to give a payment for the acres that you do the burn on.
Nathan, this is Tony, and I have a question. The last sentence on the page you're displaying says reburning is prohibited in the cumulative year period. If they're on a 3-year burn rotation for their stand, and they're going to burn it twice during a 5-year contract on some of them, and some of them they're not. How do we adjust for that?
So the cumulative year period would be the blocks. 1, 2, if you've got 3 blocks, you could come back to block 1 in year 4 because it wasn't within the cumulative period of that 1, 2, 3. That makes sense? But you can't you can't go block 1 in year 1, block 2 in year 2, and then back to block 1 in year 3. Okay.
And Joe just made mention that his goal is to reduce the amount of ground disturbance with adding new fire breaks.
So, and that's a great comment. And what my answer would be to that comment is, then this maybe isn't the right enhancement, or because it's a little trickier, you know, and I'm not a fire expert, so I'll say this with caution, but if there are other ways to get a fire break established, maybe you can get a water truck through somewhere and back burn to that, and you're creating just a black fire break that you're burning into, that would be okay, as long as it meets our burn standard and meets the burn prescription and meets all the safety standards and everything else. If there's other ways to do that, that would be okay. But if really, because the fuels don't allow it or the location doesn't allow it, the only way to do it is to, mow, disc, and clear more fire lanes, then maybe this isn't the right enhancement. So then we go back to the other, we go back to the list and we say, okay, well, what else can we do? And I wasn't going to go over this one. We could, but maybe we just go to short interval burns. So we don't add any fire breaks, but if we had an area that was on a 5 or 6 year burn rotation, maybe we're doing that 2 or 3 within the life of the contract, just to change that burn frequency up a little bit. So yeah, don't get in the box of like, I really need to do this enhancement, because sometimes whatever this enhancement is just doesn't work. So you come back to the list and you look for something else. And I found, and I know Deanna, Keisha, we all kind of look at this from different perspectives based on our roles. Tony was asking about time. To me, getting this right probably takes the most time, because where we get twisted up a little bit is we're so good with equip at just like, okay, here's my resource concern and here's my 3 practices, and we just do it and we throw it in the contract, and most of the time it works out pretty good. Because there's a little bit extra here, that doesn't always work, so you need to spend a little more time. So we tried to go down the road of 338C, had a little bit of conversation, decided it's not going to work. We don't want to build a whole bunch of extra fire breaks. Okay, back to the drawing board. Now we're back to 338B. So those things do happen. You got to give yourself time for that. And again, the more you know about your operation and goals and what we do as the technical assistance people, the better educated we are, the quicker this process hopefully goes. So good question and good point. And then I'll just cover another one that, I think is valid here in Florida. But again, it's got a little bit of a twist, just something I wanted to cover. So 612C, establishing tree shrub species to restore native plant communities. So we're reading down it, it specifically mentions American elm and American chestnut. I don't know to what extent we have those here in Florida, but not typically where we're doing most of our tree and shrub planting, as far as I know. So you might say, okay, does this really apply to me? Tree shrubs selected for planting will be adapted to the site. Okay, we can work around that. Keep looking through these criteria here. Minimum of 3 species. Okay, well, let's say we thought we could use this just for planting longleaf pine. That's not 3 species, obviously. However, we read this next sentence. An exception is in situations where a lost species is being restored to a fully stocked forest stand. So we would put longleaf pine in that criteria for this enhancement. So I have no problem with a planner making that decision. That is what we're trying to restore, where we have a quote unquote lost species from a lot of our landscape. And so longleaf pine for this enhancement would be fine. So again, because it's a national program, sometimes you're going to see language that makes you think, hey, this doesn't apply to us. But try to read through it, try to understand. If you have questions, reach out to the field office or myself. No problem at all helping somebody go through this and kind of decipher what's valid and what's not. So that's kind of how we start the process of planning enhancements. And then as we scroll down, the rest of this should, like I said, look pretty similar to our implementation requirements. We want the species listed here that's going to be planted. It's got a list of things that the participant needs to do. Planting date, technique, what's our spacing. And here, NRCS is going to verify the land use is good. We're going to do tree and shrub site prep if needed. And we would just go down through this list and make sure we're giving the participant everything they need to succeed when implementing this practice. So just kind of an overview there. Because these are based on practice standards, and we aren't here fully yet, but ultimately, I would like to see us filling out our own 612 implementation requirement sheet when doing this enhancement, just because I think it's better and it's going to give the participant more detail on what they need to get done. So while I realize that might mean people are filling this out and an IR, hopefully it's worth a bit of the redundancy to make sure the participant is getting a good conservation plan product that they can implement successfully. So we aren't necessarily there yet, aren't necessarily enforcing that yet, but it is a direction I would like to go. So that's kind of what I had. Unless people have questions on others or others they've worked with and we want to go over them. Yeah, that's kind of the enhancements overview. Bundles, as Deanna said, are just a group of enhancements that go together. The theory being a suite of conservation practices typically addresses a resource concern better than perhaps just one. So you get into the bundles, and it's a group of practices that go together to address resource or multiple resource concerns. And those are down here.
And for all the participants in the chat box, I went ahead and included these links to the websites that Nathan has been going through. So the National CSP website, enhancements and bundles, and then drilling down to the fiscal year 2021 enhancements and bundles.
So Nathan, I want to add to, oops, sorry, Nina.
You're good, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that with those enhancement sheets, I do like personally to provide and discuss that with the participant while we are in the process of field verification, or the participant just say, hey, I would like to do this in here, because that sheet actually tell them what are we going to be requiring in order for us to provide the financial assistance for that practice. So at least they can see what documentation, or if we need receipts or anything in order for us to approve that practice. So it just mentioned all the requirements that we will need in order for us to approve the practice. So at least it will give them an idea of what to keep track of, what records they need to keep, or you'll need a map exactly where the practice is going to be implemented. So at least they know what they need to save in their records when they want the payment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, the goal here is that we're handling this almost identically to how we handle an equip project or anything else. All these job sheets need to be reviewed with the participant. They need to have the information so that they can successfully implement the practice, and we can verify that it meets standards and specs and proceed to make the annual payment. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, should be looking at this just the same.
I have one question in the chat box, actually a couple questions. The first one is from Joe. Is there disking for wildlife? Hope there isn't, but has been included in the past.
No, no disking for wildlife that I'm aware of. You know, fire breaks, there's no CSP enhancement for fire breaks. So the only time, to my knowledge, that we would use disking here would likely be to disk in a fire break so we could do the CSP enhancement. There might be some, say we're trying to do a wildlife seeding or planting, some sort of overseeding or something like that. Perhaps we would come up with a job sheet that would have someone disk existing cover and then broadcast some other seed in or something like that. But off the top of my head, that's about all I can think of. And I saw Tony's question there. So again, I just went back to another Google search. I'm going to go NRCS payment schedules. All right, right here, first return. Here's our state payment schedules. We're going to go to this hyperlink map of the United States. We're going to click on Florida. All right, and here they all are.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, and I also went ahead and included in the chat box that link as well.
Now, practices are included with CSP. You know, I haven't seen a whole lot of them get contracted through CSP. There's times that it makes sense, other times that it doesn't. In CSP, practices only pay at the 10% of the payment rate. Now, the reason for that is, again, because an enhancement is a step above just the standard practice, if no one has implemented any of these practices on their operation ever before, then in theory, they're supposed to do the base practice first and then come along with the enhancement. Now, it gets a little tricky, and I would like to, cover this more on a case-by-case basis, unless program staff has a different thought. But there are some cases where you can implement the base practice and the enhancement basically at the same time. And there are situations where, let's take prescribed grazing, for example. It might be better to establish more of a basic prescribed grazing plan first, and then in year 2, come in with a prescribed grazing enhancement. So that would be a case where if someone doesn't have much of a prescribed grazing system going, we might want to do the base practice and a base plan first, just to get them rolling. and then in subsequent years, come back with the enhancement. So anyway, if you get to, I just wanted to mention that if you look this up and you see practices and you say, well, why are there practices with CSP? Well, it's because they are applicable at times, but not necessarily the best fit. And then here we get into the bundles and then down into the enhancements. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? You can raise your hand or enter it into the chat box. Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time.
This is Tony. I've got one I'll throw out there. You mentioned the practices are paid at 10% of a certain rate. Just looking at the sheet, it's got dollar amounts in there. The unit cost, is that the 10% already calculated, or do you pay 10% of that unit cost?
Already calculated. So all of our practices have what we consider the 100% payment rate. All right, and then the different programs take the percentage that's applicable to the program. So for this scenario of tree and shrub establishment, high density hand plant conifer, that's all based on the same payment rate, whether it's EQIP or CSP. But EQIP, you know, we're doing the 75% typically, and CSP, this would only be the 10%. So that's already taken off when you're looking at the appropriate payment schedule.
And looking through the various cost sheets, there are bundles like longleaf pine bundles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do we get more details on what all is included in that bundle? Aha.
All right, so on longleaf pine bundle 1, we've got to have a 666 forest stand improvement component, a prescribed burning component, an access control component, a brush management component, and a riparian forest buffer component. All right, this might not work in all situations. Right, if we don't have a riparian area, if there's nothing that we need access control for, then this just isn't going to be applicable. I will be honest, I'm not aware of any bundles actually contracted in Florida, at least when I was on program staff. They're pretty high level. They're pretty high level. You have to really have a good operator, someone who's willing to do a lot of these things and get them to all come together to pull this off.
I think that's every state. Yeah, it takes a lot. Like, you really need to know exactly what you want, where you want it, and yes, sometimes it's just better just to go by one by one.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a district conservationist and worked on something, I never had a single farmer that ended up going through with this, because when you showed them everything they had to do, they were just like, oh, no. That's too much. And again, I am not by any means trying to discourage it at all. These have a purpose, but just know that it takes some pretty good planning to make sure it all comes together correctly.
Kim Towles has a question. Would increasing the amount of water being held in an agricultural water detention area to benefit a wading bird colony be eligible for CSP?
Possibly. I'm trying to think what that might be under. for the sake of everyone's time, maybe I'd follow up on that. I know there are some, again, like I said, as a national program, there's enhancements for all over the country. I know there are some enhancements that are typically used in the Mississippi River Delta for flooding rice fields and such, longer than would be normal as a benefit to migratory birds. So we'd probably have to just look and see if there's other enhancements used in other places that we could adapt and make fit. And we can certainly do that. But off the top of my head, I don't know of anything specific to that.
So as part of the follow-up to this meeting and providing the recordings and links and so forth, we can also have a Q&A. If there's some questions we need to follow up on, happy to provide that after the meeting.
Yeah, please, or just email me, whatever. If you give me a little more specifics and give me some time to do some research into it, I'd be happy to do that.
This is Tony again, and I've got another question. We're all familiar with the idea of getting paid for a particular practice or completing an activity. Are any of these things annual payments where you get paid just to maintain or keep up with something?
Programs, do you want me to take a stab at that, or do you guys want to? It's kind of both, but whatever.
Yeah, go ahead, Nathan. I can add it.
Okay. So as Deanna said, it's an annual payment program. So that is a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. The participant only gets one payment a year. So that's a pretty key communication point. Let's say we're doing a practice like burning that typically takes place in, let's say we're doing it in February, or that's when we're trying to get it planned for. They have to understand they're not going to get their payment for that until we roll into the next fiscal year, and time comes around to make your CSP annual payment. So that's part of your question there. Then by doing these enhancements, you're qualifying yourself for that existing activity payment, which, as Deanna kind of mentioned, that's just your baseline for doing the management and conservation you're already doing. So, if you're already doing cover crops, that's supposed to come into the equation for your base payment because of how many resource concerns you're addressing. Or if you're already doing prescribed burning, that's supposed to be accounted for. And that's just part of your system. So it's a two-part payment. One is for those existing practices and management that you're already doing, and then the other is for these additional activities or enhancements. But those get all lumped together with one payment per year.
Correct. And like I mentioned before, we have those, we call it EAP1 and EAP2. So the participant needs to know that they're only going to receive that annual payment only in the land uses that they are implementing new practices or enhancements. So if the participant have cropland and pasture under the contract and they only schedule a practice under cropland, they need to know that they will only receive the annual payment for everything that they need to maintain under that land use only, on the cropland, because they didn't do any new practice on the pasture area. So like I mentioned before, they will forego the payment for any of the land use on where they don't implement a new practice or enhancement. Like Nathan mentioned, we do the payment by fiscal year. So they have until September 30 in order to complete the practice under that fiscal year. And that way they'll get the payment for that practice or enhancement. Most likely we do the payments after October. So we have a national provider deadline on when we need to have all those payments done by. And from 2020 and forward, all these contracts for CSP, we need to do the payment on before December, kind of. So we will have a deadline from national headquarters. They'll say, okay, you can start approving payment probably after October. So we will need to have the participant paid before on or December. So it's not like prior years, like I think it was from 2018 and before, the participant has the option to select the payment. Okay, I want my payment in this calendar year, we'll say in December, and they also have the option to select the payment in the next fiscal year on January, and it was more for tax purposes. But now the policy changed, so now the participant will need to get the payment no matter what in that fiscal year. So, like Nathan mentioned, if the practice was done in February, they need to wait until probably October or so in order to get paid for that practice or enhancement. The other thing I wanted to add, sometimes we have participants that they plan with the field offices, okay, I want to do my practice this year. And for some reason, we'll say beyond their control, something happened, they're not able to complete that practice that fiscal year. We can do a modification to reschedule the practice for the next fiscal year. So that's something we can also do in this contract because, yeah, sometimes there's stuff that happen beyond the participant control that for some reason they are not able to complete the practice, we'll say cover crop, and they can find the seats or something like that. We can schedule those practices, but yes, they need to know that they are going to receive the payment in the fiscal year on where the practice is scheduled.
Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any hand raised or chat box questions. Nathan, if you could pass the presentation back to me, I'm going to go ahead and just include our contact information up on the screen.
Do I need to pass it back or just stop presenting?
You'll need to go ahead and pass it back. You can right-click on my name in the participants list and then make me the presenter.
Sorry, did it? Did it work yet?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so just want to thank you all for joining us today. We do have Juan Hernandez on the line. If Juan, you want to come back on and provide the closing remarks for the meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to make sure. Well, I was a little late coming in, and I wanted to apologize for that. I was jumping from one meeting to the next, and I asked Nina to open the training. But I did join. I was maybe 10 minutes into it. I am very pleased with the exchange. I was listening and looking at it. I was taking the training myself. I have to admit that CSP came online after I was no longer in the field. And I sympathize with the complexity of the program. And I wanted to acknowledge that the program itself is something in Florida that we're learning. We're building it. In fact, CSP is a program that has the greatest expansion, in my opinion, due to the fact that we are not using it as much as we could. And I'm delighted that you are on board taking this training because you will be a key component along our field offices to market and to sell this program through the state. I appreciate, like I said, the engagement, a lot of questions, and that is what this type of trainings make it worthwhile when we start engaging into meaningful conversations and questions. Like I said, I recognize that the program, it can be somewhat complex, so I don't want you to be shy of coming forward with any questions as you work with us into delivering this program. But with that, I wanted to thank you all and looking forward for next opportunities. And the floor is yours, Nina. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. And thank you all again for participating. This concludes our training. Like I mentioned, I'll follow up with a number of items, the recording for this training, links that Nathan went through. Again, if there's any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure to include it within the Q&A portion. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be seeing each other soon, hopefully. So take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.